Okay, hello everyone. In this short video, we're just going to be looking at how to make the language that we use a bit more formal. The two things we're going to look at is the passive voice and something called nominalization. Nom from the word name, which is ultimately related to the word noun. So making nouns, mostly from verbs, but also from adjectives. I'm going to show you there. Okay, so let's get started with having a look at some of these structures. If you've never seen them before, you might you might not know what they are, but most of you should at least know the passive voice. Okay, let's have a look. So the passive voice, we'll talk about that, the form of it later, but let's just have a look at some from the example, from the model answer that we've been studying. So this viewpoint is based on the idea that, so that's the passive voice there, is, and then there's the verb based, is based. This one here, there's the verb be and taken into account. This one here, be and, be and given. This one here, be and required. This one here, be and released. And this one here, be and kept. Okay, and so the passive voice is basically formed by the object of an active sentence plus the verb be in a certain form. That's why it's got square brackets. So it could be is, could be are, could be in the case it is now, and could be was or were in the past. And then the verb 3 of the verbs, and we've looked at that in the previous video, verb 1, verb 2, verb 3, if you remember from eat with an S sometimes, ate, and then verb 3, eaten. Okay. So let's have a look. When I say object, what do I mean? Let's have a look at this. So this is the more basic form. This is called the active voice. You don't need to know these things, but it's just useful for those of you who've been studying English. This is the active voice. It's the opposite of the passive voice. So passive voice, active voice. So this is the active voice, this one written here. So people base this viewpoint on the idea that, so the subject is people, the verb is base, and the object is this viewpoint. So English is an SVO an SVO language, like many languages, subject, verb, object. Most European languages are SVO. All right, so basically to form the passive voice, we take the object of an active sentence and we move it into the position at the front of the sentence. So have a look at this. This viewpoint comes at the beginning. Then we need the verb. Here's base. Problem is, it's in the incorrect form. At the moment, it's sitting in verb 1, but we need it to be in verb 3. So there it is, based. And then what we do need to do is change this verb slightly by adding something just before it, and it's a form of be in this case. So this viewpoint is based because this viewpoint, it's not are, there's only one. So one is, he is, she is, it is, right? So there's only one, it must be is, and then based. And then you can say by the subject if you really wanted to. So you could say this viewpoint is based by people on the idea that, but this is very seldom used in the passive. Okay. All right, so let's have a look at the way they are formed in this case. Have a look here. So the judge should take into account circumstances, blah, 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 blah. So we've taken circumstances, which is the object of the sentence, and we've made it into the position number 1. Sorry, let's put position number 1 here. And then what I can see the word should take. The main verb is take, right? This is an auxiliary or helping verb. The word should, could, will, might, may, and should, could, will, might, may, and must. Okay, these are all helping or auxiliary or technically they're called modal verbs, but they're auxiliary. The main verb is what we're focusing on here, and the main verb is take. So I need to look at the main verb, create a verb 3 form of it, and there it becomes taken. Okay, and then everything else stays the same. Should stays there, but I just need to add a form of be. What's the type of grammar that comes after these auxiliary verbs like must, could, should? It is the verb 0. Okay, so let's just do a verb 0 of, let's say, is. So verb 1, okay, he is, she is, it is, they are, we are, and I am. Then over here, was and were, and this one is been. Okay, so verb 0 of all of these is be, right? So verb 0 is what follows these auxiliary verbs like should, could, might, must, can, will, etc., etc. Okay, so we don't need to change anything else. We just need to move circumstances to the front, keep should as it is, add the verb be. In this case, it's verb 0 because it's followed by the word should, and then the verb 3 of take becomes taken. Okay, and so you can carry on looking through that if you want. Just pause the video and get your head around these if you want. Let's do this last one just because it's a little bit different to the rest. These are very similar. Should, will, and may. These are all auxiliary verbs, so they function the same way as this one we've just done here. But let's just look at this one here. Murderers need to be kept away from society. The police, think about it, the police need, some people say needs because it's a single unit, but I prefer to say need. So they need to keep murderers away from society. Okay, that's the active voice. That's just a standard SVO, subject, verb, object. But you can see here we need to make murderers as the subject. Here I've written object because it just makes it easier to understand that the object from the active voice comes to the front of the sentence. But technically anything at the beginning of a sentence is a subject, but getting technical here. Okay, so murderers at the front of the sentence need to keep. Notice keep is the main verb, MV for main verb. So that's the only one that gets edited into verb 3 format. Okay, so keep becomes kept, and then need to stays the same, and then we add the auxiliary verb, in this case be, again a verb 0 because we've got the infinitive to be or not to be. Okay, so no change of the verb be here, away from society. Okay, so we'll come back to nominalization. Let's just do a little bit more practice of the passive voice. Okay, right, so the police arrest 120 people every day. This is subject, verb, object, and then every day is not part of this SVO. All right, so there's the subject, there's the verb, there's the object. So we know that that's an active voice. Okay, but now what we need to do is convert it into the passive voice here. So you should be able to do this. We take the object, 120 people. Then I'm looking at the verb. I need to make it into verb 3. Arrest is a regular verb, so I just add ed. So arrested. But there's something missing here. What? We need the verb be. But which form is it? Look at this. This is everyday. This is present simple. So it must be the present simple form of be after 120 people. Now that's people. That's a number of people. It's not peoples, but it is a plural, right? So 120 persons, as some people say. It's incorrect. We say people in English. So 120 people are, because they are or we are arrested, and then every day stays the same. Okay, I'd like you now just to pause the video, pause the video, and think about what the answers for the rest of these might be. Okay, so pause the video, and then in about 10 seconds we're going to carry on. So I'll wait for you to think about it. Pause the video. All right, let's start. So it's always going to start with 120 people because that's the new subject. The object is taken from the active. So we'll just keep this all the same, 120 people. Now, the police are arresting 120 people. So what we're doing is we're taking the main verb, in this case it's arresting, and we're keeping it as verb 3. Okay, so arrest stays the same. Arrested, and then we can change this. There's no everyday here, so there we go. We can just full stop there. So what is going to happen here? We've got the ing form and we've got this are, so that makes things a little bit more difficult because I want to change this. This is at the moment situation. I can see from my balcony, I'm looking out onto the street and I'm talking to my mother on the telephone, mobile phone, and I say, the police are arresting 120 people at least. I can just see them. I've counted 120. Okay, imagine that. All right. But my focus is on the 120 people. I'm not interested in the police. One of the reasons is because we know exactly who arrests. I don't need to explain who arrests people. Everybody knows it's the police who have the authority to arrest. Okay, so 120 people. Remember, the auxiliary stays the same. There's the auxiliary. This is are, so that doesn't change. Okay, but then we do need a be here, a form of be. So what I do is I look at this and I go, okay, that's the form that is taking there. I'm putting it in here. So there I've got to put being. B-E-I-N-G. So 120 people are being arrested. Great. Let's do this one. 120 people should, can, might, must arrest 120. The police might, could, should, can, will, may, all of those auxiliary modal verbs. Arrested stays the same. What's happening here? Well, we need the auxiliary verb to stay the way it is, and be, the form of be here. So the auxiliary verb can be any of these. Let's choose a small one because I can't fit all of those in there. So let's just use can. And then what comes after can? It must be the verb 0 of any verb. Whatever comes after can or must or might must be the verb 0 of that verb. So it must be the verb 0 of be, which, as you can see here, is exactly the same. So 120 people can be arrested, might be arrested, must be arrested, should be arrested. Okay, that's that one done. So now we've got the past tense. The police arrested 120 people. So 120 people, arrested stays the same. What's the past tense of be? Okay, it could be was, verb 2 is was or were, if you remember. Verb 1 is are, am, and is. So what's the correct answer here? 120 people, was or were? Well, I think you know the answer. Were, right? Because it's plural. 120 people were arrested. This one here, very quickly. 120 people. The police have arrested 120 people. So let's keep the same. Arrested. No change there. That is an auxiliary verb, so I keep that the same. The only thing I need to change is the be takes the same form as this. We know that have if I'm using present perfect, takes the verb 3 form. Can you remember? That's been. So have been arrested. Okay. And this one here, would have arrested. You should know the rule by now. Arrested stays the same. And would have there's 2 auxiliary verbs, but they don't change anything. And then I just change this one here. Would have also past perfect conditional. Sorry, it's not past. It's third conditional. And a third conditional, if you subscribe to my IELTS grammar course, you'll know all about these sort of things. But arrested is verb 3 of been again, and so that doesn't change. So 120 people would have been arrested if, if they had enough police numbers, or if they'd stepped any further, or it's a conditional. Okay. So you know the general structure now. This SVO becomes O, object, B, verb 3. Let's just get that out the way so it's not confusing. And then, sorry, by S, but as I said, by S is not very common. By subject. Okay. So object of the active voice plus B plus verb 3, and then by the police, by the judge, by the court, etc. Okay. Now, these are very common passive statements, structures that come in more academic writing, and there's something called a dummy it. Dummy means placeholder. So actually what it does is it doesn't actually mean anything. The it just has to be there because English, unlike Spanish or Italian, has to have a subject mentioned to it. I can't just start a sentence with is. So I need to put in this dummy it. And it doesn't refer to anything. It just has to be there. It's a bit like weather. When I talk about it's raining, that's also raining. When we talk about the weather or when we talk about the temperature, it also uses this dummy it. It doesn't refer to anything. It's just something I have to say to make grammatical sense in English. So same thing's happening here. Okay. So it is often said, or it is often claimed that. It's another way to say many people believe that, but because we want to sound more academic, we use the passive voice. It is commonly suggested, it's commonly believed that, commonly in this case means many people think this. Okay, and we don't always have to use a dummy it. Let's have a look at this one. A well-known study of language acquisition is regularly referred to when we talk about childhood psychology. Okay, you could mention it that way. So you don't have to use the dummy it, but we still use the passive voice here is regularly referred to. That's verb 3. There's the verb be, and it's a passive voice. Okay, so please look out for how regularly the passive voice comes up in academic writing, because once you've mastered it, you can really improve your level of English and make a great impression on the examiner. Okay, there is going to be more practice of this later on in this course, but this is sort of an introduction, just getting you used to the way it is structured. Okay. Now let's have a look back at this section here, which I was going to look at, called nominalization. This is making nouns from verbs, and there is a dedicated practice session for this in the resources section of this video. So I'm not going to do a practice with you. You're going to try and do it yourself. Okay. So let's just double check what it is. So nominalization, it's making nouns from verbs. Usually, most of the time it's from verbs, but occasionally from adjectives here. But most of the time it's from verbs. Okay, and the reason why we use nominalization, again, it makes our language sound more formal and more academic. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Circumstances should be taken into account. This passive voice, by the way, when deciding the punishment. So if you look over here, we can see that this is a noun that's been nominalized from the verb to punish. Okay, so I could rewrite it in more basic English and less academic sounding. When let's say when people decide to punish. Okay, so circumstances should be taken into account when the judge, when the police, when people in general decide to punish criminals. Okay, now that's perfectly acceptable English, but it's not academic. It's not very academic, and it doesn't sound very academic if I use this verb, especially if it's in the active voice. So if we just finished talking about passive voice, so why don't we do it now? So circumstances should be taken into account when criminals are punished. Okay, let's just get it out. Get rid of that. So when criminals are punished. This is sort of a midway spot. When you use the passive voice, we can say the active voice, passive voice, and nominalization. We go from informal, semi-formal, and then using nouns instead of the verbs becomes formal. So this is a sort of semi-formal way of saying it, are punished. Okay. Let's have a look at this word. This word comes from model answer. Require the expansion of prison complexes. Let's use the semi-formal, the passive voice. So I can say, will therefore require prison complexes to be, there's the passive voice, expanded. Okay, so semi-formal, it's acceptable, and it's good to have a mixture of passive and nominalization. You don't want to use nominalization all the time. You don't want to use passive all the time. It's a nice mixture between the two. Okay, which is fine here. But we're certainly trying to avoid the use of active. It would sound strange to say, therefore, it would therefore require builders, workmen, laborers to expand prison complexes. Why on earth do I need to mention a builder or a bricklayer or somebody that makes buildings? It would sound strange, so that's why we use the passive voice, but obviously even better, nominalization. Okay, right, let's have a look at this one. Evidence of rehabilitation should be a deciding factor, so there's rehabilitation. If I was to use it as a verb, evidence that the criminal was rehabilitated should be a deciding factor. So that stays the same there. So evidence that the criminal was rehabilitated or is rehabilitated should be a deciding factor. Okay, passive voice, semi-formal, acceptable, but of course, rehabilitation, even better. More informed decision making. Okay, you can see the verb sitting in there based on evidence. Okay, so let's do this one. Um, um, decisions. This is okay. This is the end of a sentence. So let's start with okay. Decisions. I'll come back to this. Decisions are made based on evidence. Okay. So decisions are made. Informed decisions. That's what I want to say. Okay. There we go. Informed means full of knowledge, based on knowledge and evidence. So informed decisions are made based on evidence. More informed decisions are made based on evidence. Okay, there we go, passive voice. Again, semi-formal. And the word decision by itself is, of course, and also a type of nominalization. And I need some space to put that one there. So let's do this one over here on the left. So decision, make a decision, let's say, comes from the verb to decide. So people should decide what to do. People should make decisions about what to do. This one is the option to take if you want to sound more academic. Okay, and now sometimes they're formed from adjectives, like the word flexibility comes from the word flexible. So such flexibility provides for much more informed decisions. When rules are flexible, adjective. When rules are flexible, more informed decisions can be made, etc. Okay, from there we've got, this is not passive voice, because this is not a verb. So even though it looks like it, this is an adjective. Okay, so when rules are flexible, more informed decisions can be made, but we prefer such or this. Such and this are very similar. This flexibility or such flexibility provides for much more informed decision making. Okay, right, so we're not going to do any practice here because, as I said, this is going to be you're going to be working by yourself for this nominalization practice. So look for on the resources section of this video for the links to your nominalization practice. If you have any questions about this, let me know in the comments down below, or go on to the Facebook page for the IELTS step-by-step community group, and there'll be students and me there doing our best to try and help you. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.